All right, back here with another round of confidence picks here on Bigger Ten for week 3 of the college football season. I'm Steve Deace. He's Aaron McIntyre. Aaron, before we unveil our picks this week, there are 13 games in our league this week. Why don't you give us a rundown of where things stand heading into week 3?
We were both right on Ohio State, Penn State, Minnesota. This 15 through 9, we got all of those correct. You had Ohio State, Minnesota, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, USC, and Washington in that order. I had Ohio State, Penn State, USC, Oregon, Washington, Rutgers, and Minnesota in that order. Where it got a little bit more interesting is in 8 through 1, you correctly predicted Wisconsin over South Dakota, although that was more hairy even into the third quarter than anybody expected. Oregon over Boise State, that was much more hairy for the duration of the game than anyone expected, I think. 6, Texas over Michigan, you got that right. Neither of us got Maryland over Michigan State correct. Michigan State with that big upset win. Nebraska over Colorado, you hit on. Iowa over Iowa State was another one we both missed. Illinois over Kansas, you got that one right, but you missed on Northwestern over Duke. I got Indiana, missed on Maryland. Hit on Wisconsin, Texas, and Nebraska. Missed on Kansas. I mean, that Duke-Northwestern game, you aren't a real college football sicko unless you stayed up on a Friday night to watch that game go into overtime by the shores of Lake Michigan. Duke over Northwestern in overtime, and my least confident pick was least confident for a reason. I missed on Iowa over Iowa State. That brings us to this week, Steve. Oh, and our bonus picks, I forgot about those. We got to get these in. You had Maryland -8 over Michigan State. That was a miss. I had Oregon -19.5 over Boise State. That was just a bit outside. And that means that you lead this week 270 to 268 after 2 weeks of play. Now we can talk about week 3.
All right, let's get to it. By the slimmest of margins, here we go. My 13-point game is going to be Michigan State over Prairie View. That's more of a statement of Prairie View A&M than Michigan State, but they are playing better than I thought they would, at least to start things off. I'm going to go with Iowa over Troy, who's been one of the better Group of 5 programs the last few years, but lost their head coach. Lost a lot of talent. It's been a struggle for them to start the season. I'm going to take Nebraska over UNI, but I got to tell you, man.
Trap.
I know. Maybe because I've watched UNI so many times against Iowa and Iowa State, but I'll take Nebraska and put 11 on that game. I'll take 10 with Michigan over Arkansas State. I really don't know what the Michigan psyche is. Many of these players have just not been punched in the throat like this. So they could come back and like you saw Clemson do last week against Appalachian State and look extremely impressive. The Daubers could be down. I don't know. That's why I'm only putting 10 on it. I'm going to put 9 points on Minnesota over Nevada. I'm going to put 8 points on Alabama over Wisconsin. Like I said, on Bigger Ten, I don't know how many Wisconsin players would even start at Alabama. I'll put 7 on Illinois over Central Michigan, but that is a letdown spot if there ever was one. I'll put 6 on Oregon over Oregon State. I just don't know where the Ducks are. And whatever is the best game that this version of Oregon State with its new head coach can play, my guess is the Ducks are seeing it this Saturday. I'm going to put 5 points on Northwestern over Eastern Illinois. Not sure about the quarterback change there for Northwestern and what that means. I'm going to put 4 points on Notre Dame over Purdue. I just, like Michigan, I don't know where the psyche of this team is at. They've got some issues at quarterback, like Michigan, just a different one, with their quarterback being banged up. And they've got some touted kids behind him. So how much longer do they ride that out? I thought Purdue looked really good in its opener and has had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. I'll take Indiana to play its first game at the Rose Bowl since it was in the 1968 Rose Bowl when it lost to O.J. Simpson. He kind of really sliced and diced them up. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Anyway, he went on and won he and USC went on and won the national championship, and that's the last time Indiana played in the Rose Bowl. I think they go in against the Fighting Deshaun Fosters. I'm going with the Fighting Kirk Cignettis. I think they get her done. Indiana's actually favored in that game by about 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Virginia at home against Maryland. I typically love it when teams come home after winning a big game on the road, and Virginia did. They went on the road, came from behind to beat Wake Forest last week. Maryland's the more talented team, though, but I also don't know where their psyche is on the road in sleepy Charlottesville. I just don't have a read on this game, so I was only putting 2 points or so on it, no matter who I picked. And I'm going to put 1 point on Washington State to pull the outright upset over Washington. Again, just the bitterness of little brother being left behind. And Washington State's looked good first 2 weeks of the year. And then my bonus pick, I'm going to lay the wood with Minnesota at home against Nevada. This is one of those games where you look at your Minnesota schedule, you're not sure how many more wins you've got. So when you've got a real chance to put a crooked number on somebody and play some guys, you take advantage of it. Everybody's hyped up to play, thinking, I'm getting in the game this week, and I think many of them will.
All right, here are my picks for this week. I've got Michigan State over Prairie View at the 13 slot as well. Iowa over Troy at the 12 slot. I'm heading to that game, actually, this weekend. 11, I've got Michigan State over Arkansas State. I'm kind of like you. I'm a little bit leery of how Michigan is going to respond, but in terms of sheer talent, that you shouldn't have much of a problem with Arkansas State. Nebraska over UNI. I'm tempted to put this lower, but UNI is just not the same type of team that they have been in previous years and yesteryears, so I'm not too worried about it. If it was week 1, I'd be a little bit more inclined to maybe tinker with the upset, but we're in week 3 now, so I don't think you need to worry about that. Minnesota over Nevada at the 9 slot. This is your bonus bet of the week at -14. That's laying a lot of points, but Nevada has not looked exactly that impressive this year, so I don't blame you. Number 8, I've got Indiana over UCLA. I've got it this high because of that line. To me, it really doesn't make sense to have a line where a team that's coming over across country to the West Coast for the first time this season with a first-year head coach and all of the attrition and additions that they've had on that roster, and they're a 3-point favorite. To me, that screams more like a 6, 7, 8-point favorite. If the line is set at 3 points for an away team like that, so something tells me the sharps, or at least the wise guys in Vegas, know something about this matchup that maybe is not apparent to the average Joe. 7, I've got Alabama over Wisconsin. You know, Wisconsin has struggled its first 2 weeks, both against Western Michigan and South Dakota. Now, South Dakota is a really good FCS squad, but, I mean, they struggled even into the second half against South Dakota. So I just don't – I think this is probably going to be one where Alabama could cover. They didn't look great against USF again last week. Now, that final score was very deceiving, and USF, their coaches, deserved that final score for being so cowardly, trying to kick a field goal instead of taking the lead or tying it late in the game there. But I still think Alabama responds nicely over what the rest of the nation saw the rest of that game this week against Wisconsin. We got Illinois over Central Michigan. This one, I'm thinking I might be kicking myself later. As you said, this is kind of a hangover type game for Illinois. 5, I've got Northwestern over Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois is not that good. Again, kind of like Western. Maryland over Virginia. This is one where you and I differ because I do just believe Maryland is the more talented roster. Virginia will come in with its hair on fire, but I think Maryland, I think just from a talent perspective, they should be able to take care of business there. Notre Dame over Purdue. I don't know. I don't know how you respond to something like that. Teams like Michigan, teams like Iowa in the Big Ten. They're thankful this week that they weren't like the only major kind of stubbed toe, I should say, in the top 25, because Notre Dame took most of the main headlines away from those teams. And so I'm not super confident. Hudson Card looked incredible their first game for Purdue. So this could be, I think Notre Dame will look better offensively. They have to, I have to think. But I think this one could have the potential for a few points. 2, I've got Oregon over Oregon State. I just don't trust Oregon yet, which is crazy if you would have told me that 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I just don't trust Oregon quite yet, so that's why I've got them ranked down there. And then number 1, I've got Washington over Washington State, though I'm not at all confident about that either. My bonus pick, Notre Dame Purdue over 45.5. And man, those mid 40 totals games, they can go one way or another really, really fast, it seems like. Like, we're either going to be under by 10 points or over by 30, it seems like. But I do think that Purdue, having 2 weeks to respond, they should be able to, they showed the ability offensively to move the ball during their first outing, and I have to think Notre Dame is motivated to show that they are not what they were last week. So I've got over 45.5 in Notre Dame and Purdue as my bonus pick.
All right, good stuff. That'll do it for this week's Confidence Picks. We are back at it again right here on the channel on Michigan Podcast, Bigger 10, and here with the picks each week as well. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. Enjoy your football weekend. We'll see you next week.